Hi, and welcome to That's My Purse Pod, the podcast all about King of the Hill. I'm Jason.
And I'm Jimmy.
So how has your week been, Jimmy? How was your weekend? All that good stuff?
My week? That's a good question. I'm drawing a blank. Oh, I went to a Power Ranger convention this past weekend in San Antonio. That was a lot of fun. Got to meet some of the newer Power Rangers from the newer season, so that's always a great thing. I bought some figures, spent a little money, so keep the economy going. But other than that, I've had a pretty chill week. What about you? What have you been up to?
Not much. Got dinner with friends over the weekend, which is always fun. Um, I had a friend who was in town who hasn't been around for a while, or hasn't been in town for a while since I haven't seen him. He lives in another city. Actually, our friend Mark, who has been on the podcast twice, he was in town, so we got dinner and stuff. So that was fun. I didn't plan much for the weekend because we were supposed to have this atmospheric river or whatever they're called for San Francisco. So I was already like prepared. Okay, well, this is going to be an at-home weekend because the last time we had one of those atmospheric river type things, it was just like torrential downpour for a week or whatever. So I'm just like, all right, I'm staying home this weekend. And then it just like barely sprinkled, or at least where I was. So I did a few things. Like I went to the Golden Gate Park and I went and watched Scream 6. But beyond that, not too much.
Scream 6. Man, I've only seen it once. I'm big. I feel like, I don't know if we talked about this on last podcast, but I'm a big Scream fan. I know you're a Scream fan. Do you
Hmm.
think you're going to see it again? I don't know. Did you watch it in 3D? I didn't ask that.
I did not watch it in 3D.
So, okay. I hear that it's not worth watching in 3D, which I figure watching it already. But I kind of do want to watch it in 3D because I feel like this is going to be the only Scream movie that's ever going to be released in 3D.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was just like there's only a handful of movies that are improved by 3D in my mind. And I feel like this wouldn't have been one of them.
Oh, definitely not. I don't think. I think there's one scene, maybe two scenes that I'm like would be good in 3D. They both have people on like a second story kind of thing,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. But other than that, I feel like it wouldn't look as good because I didn't notice any gimmicky stuff like where knives come to the screen or whatnot. I don't know if you ever seen Friday the 13th in 3D or Friday the 13th 3D or whatever, but they really do 3D stuff. Like there's a character that yo-yos, so he yo-yos into the camera, and there's a juggler person, and they juggle into the camera. Like they do things purposely so that there will be 3D stuff to look at.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes it's not bad. They'll have 3D stuff, but it just doesn't like. I guess in my mood, it doesn't. In my mind, it doesn't really improve the actual film. You know, like oh, he is. Look at how awesome he is, or whatever. Or, oh, look, he's done. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it's never. It doesn't ever really enhance the film, if you will.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
there's a few films where it does. Like I would say like the first Doctor Strange, for example. Absolutely, that would benefit from it. Like because of all the 3D worlds and all the weird alternate universes he goes to and stuff. When she does the whole touching him on the third eye and sending him like that's good. Or even like this most recent Ant-Man would have been a great one. Or Avatar. But it's just like, oh look, they jumped over a car and it looks really cool, or just like gimmicky like that. It's just like, it doesn't really enhance the movie.
Yeah. I think animated movies do better in 3D as well, just because of the nature of it. You know, you can animate that a little better because most 3D is just rendered over. So, man, maybe the new Spider-Man, maybe Spider-Man No Way Home would have been fun in 3D.
There are definitely scenes that I think would have been improved by 3D, or would have been interesting by 3D. Spider-Man, I do think would be good just because of the whole dynamic of him swinging through the city and stuff. That would be pretty cool in 3D.
I mean, I don't know. Would you go see if they were like the Banshees of Inisher is re-released in 3D? Are you gonna go out and see it?
No, that is not going to be a compelling event for me to want to go see it in 3D. That would be funny though if they just released movies that have no business being in 3D in 3D. Like, oh, we're releasing Tar in 3D.
You're gonna go to the theater next, and it's gonna be like Oppenheimer now in 3D.
It yeah, exactly. I why would you? Well, no, I mean if there are scenes in it that that could be benefited by 3D, then sure. But beyond that, no. I mean, I'm trying to think of like all of now that I think about it, a lot of Christopher Nolan's films, not all of them, but a lot of them actually would benefit from 3D.
I mean, Inception for sure.
Inception, I'd say not the first Batman that he did, but the Dark Knight. There were
Uh,
definitely a lot of scenes, especially the Hong Kong scene, which would have been great
hmm.
in 3D. I don't. Batman Begins might have had a few scenes. Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, maybe. Um, Tenet, I don't think needed 3D. Dunkirk would have been fine with 3D.
Oh, I'm definitely watching Memento in 3D.
Yeah, so he does a lot of movies that I think would actually be cool in 3D. Well, maybe like maybe half of his films would be great in 3D.
Man, I did not know he directed The Prestige. Man, Nolan's got a really good track record. Now that I'm looking at all his movies.
Interstellar, that would have been great in 3D. Yeah, he does. I think it's because he's very granted he's very artsy, I guess you could say. Like I don't know if that's the right word I want to use, but like he's not a Michael Bay where he's just like I'm going to make a movie with a bunch of explosions and action and who cares if the plot makes sense or is good or whatever or if the acting is good. Whereas I think Christopher Nolan puts a lot of thought into the movies that he makes and has like a message or an idea or some kind of sentiment he wants to get across and he goes really deep and that's why like when you even look at his body of work he's only directed a handful of films. He doesn't directed a ton.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the way to go though. Like, if you don't think you're gonna like, you shouldn't just direct anything. You know, your body like Nolan's got a great body of work. I mean, wow, I'm shocked. I might be a Nolan fan now.
Yeah, if you look at Oppenheimer, that's going to be his 12th film that he directed.
I mean, Tenet was okay. I'm just gonna say like it was. It's a. I didn't hate the movie. Dunkirk, I love though. I love Dunkirk. And Inception's great. I'm not a big like into Interstellar as a lot of people are. I think it's just okay, but I know a lot of people love that movie.
I loved Interstellar. I loved that one. That was one of my favorites. I liked Inception. The thing that I hated about Inception, and it's not even really Inception's fault to be honest, but like Inception changed movie trailers like from like if you look at Inception or if you look at Inception, so there's like movie trailers pre-Inception and post-Inception, and Inception definitely changed movie trailers to where everybody has to have that big wah noise in their
Man,
theater or in their trailer.
man. Oh,
Like that's the only thing that upset me about Inception, but it was a good movie. Uh, I liked Tenet, but it was definitely one of those movies you have to watch like 2 or 3 times in order to fully get, which was kind of a distraction, I guess you could say.
man, I love Memento a lot. As a like growing up, that was one of my favorite movies. But I also love The Prestige a lot too.
Prestige. Well, I mean, even those early ones, Memento and Prestige, were like classics and amazing.
Man, I haven't seen Insomnia in a long time, so I don't even. But that's one of Robin Williams' like more dramatic roles, so that's
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
man. Maybe our next podcast should be Christopher Nolan movies.
Yep. We can. Well, we'd have 12 episodes, so it'd be a quick
Yeah,
series. But yeah, that wouldn't be a bad one, though. I wouldn't mind doing it. I do think I'm looking forward to seeing Oppenheimer. Uh, I don't know. I guess it depends on how you want to choose it because technically, Dunkirk was a historical film, whereas Oppenheimer's more of a biopic. And I don't. I'm looking at his body of work. I don't think he's done that before.
No, this will be his first.
It's going to be interesting to see how he handles that.
Yeah, because Dunkirk, he has more freedom to tell a story, like his own story, and kind of mold it his
Hmm.
own way. But Oppenheimer is like, I mean, you could like play with the facts a little bit, but you got to hit certain beats for sure.
I think. I think. What was the joke? So because he has to show up in every one of his films, that Michael Caine's going to probably show up at one point. It's like, oh, he cast Michael Caine to play the plutonium atom.
Oh, I don't see Michael Caine on this list, but do you know who I do see on this list? Josh Peck from Drake and Josh.
What the? Okay. Oh, David Dastmalchian. He's finally not playing a Marvel or DC character.
Yeah, sure. So Rami Malek's in this movie. Matt Damon, Jack Quaid. That's not interesting. Gary Oldman. This is a good cast. I feel like I haven't.
Gary Oldman's definitely one of those guys
Just
who's
in there.
good in like 90% of the films that he's in.
Sometimes I don't even recognize him. That's how good he is.
Josh Hartnett. Now that's a name I haven't heard in forever. Didn't he just like vanish off the face of the earth for a few years?
Josh Hartnett isn't one of my like I don't know guilty pleasure horror movies. I don't know. Do you think you can name what it is? Oh wait, he's in
30
two
Days of Night.
actually. No, that's not really. I think even guiltier of a pleasure.
I can't. No idea. That's the only one I really know him from. I know he was in Hollywood Homicide, but I wouldn't really call that a horror film.
The
Um,
Faculty.
okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh man, it's like where aliens take over a high school and these kids have detention or whatever. It was so cheesy back in the day. That and he's in Halloween H2O. So
Ah, yeah, it looks like that was his breakout role.
Hollywood Halloween H2O.
I mean, according to this, I mean that's the first film he's listed in beings in. So
Oh, interesting. Because I always think of well, I don't. I mean, I don't think of his. Maybe it's not his breakout role, but when I think of him, I always think of Pearl Harbor.
oh yeah, he was in that. I Pearl Harbor just doesn't even exist in my mind anymore. So like I don't even remember. I like this. You mentioning it right now is the first time I've thought of Pearl Harbor in probably decades.
I think about it a lot. Not a lot, actually. I mean, when I do think about it, I think about how it was two DVDs long back when DVDs first came out. Like you had to stop and then switch to disc.
Reminds me of old PlayStation days. Like when you had a long game that had 3 or 4 discs, like Final Fantasy 9 or something like that, and you'd have to switch halfway through.
Oh yeah, I mean, you knew it was a good game if that was like if it had more than one disc.
Yeah, I want to see Josh Hartnett play Hank Hill in a film. That'd be fun.
Is it in 3D?
Sure, why not? King of Hill
Nice.
live action King of the Hill remake. Get on it, Mike Judge. Get Chris. That'll be Christopher Nolan's next film. After Oppenheimer, he'll make the live action King of the Hill.
Is this a darker, more gritty King of the Hill?
Oh, it will be.
Oh my gosh, now I can't remember her name. Oh, Nancy. I feel like Kirsten Dunst is going to be Nancy or something like that.
Hmm. We should. Yeah. That would be a pretty interesting thing. Or if we just went through like all of Christopher Nolan's like normal people he hires, it'd be like I don't know. Christian Bale would put on weight and play Bill. Michael Caine would be Cotton probably, but they do
Michael
like to
Caine wouldn't
force
be
perspective.
Bobby.
No, Bobby would be like Dane DeHaan or something like that.
Oh man, Killian Murphy's got to be in here somewhere. Maybe he'll be Boomhauer.
Killian Murphy's Boomhauer. Yes, I like that. Well, let's see. Let's jump right into this episode then.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll do a live adaptation of this episode, Peggy the Boggle Champ. This is episode 53 for us. Season 1, episode 9. We're getting to the end here. I think we only have one more episode that we're reviewing after this, and then we're going to have like a closer episode after that. So 2 episodes coming up after this. So, thank you for sticking with us. And we're in the first season, which is always one of the best ones, as I always say. This one is a Peggy heavy episode, as you can guess from the title. It starts out at the Hill House, and Peggy and Nancy and Min are playing Boggle. This is Min's first time playing Boggle. Keep in mind, Min only joined the season, or the show really, maybe 3 episodes prior, so we're still kind of getting to know her and everybody like that. And so Peggy's like, "Oh yeah, this is a popular game, and you just got to find the words and stuff." And so they put it down, and Min's like, "Ba mi tam yum," and then Nancy's like, "Oh, you have to use real words." She's like, "Yeah, ba mi tam yum, Thai spicy noodle soup. It's really tasty." And then the guys are all in the living room watching TV, and Dale's like, "Oh, it's such a nice day outside. Nancy shouldn't be cooped up indoors all day. She should be out there hanging my laundry." And then, of course, on TV, they hear that stereotypical like Sunday, Sunday, Sunday announcement. But it's funny because it's like Sunday, 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 and Saturday. The Dallas Mower Expo, where you can see the Mulchinator and try out the latest models. And then, like, they have a random drop in there where they're like 10,000 oil paintings that must be sold, which like has nothing to do with it. But okay, whatever. And all the guys are like enamored by this. They're like, "A mower show? Oh, we got to go." And then we see Peggy looking through a dictionary, and she's like, "Oh, pad thai doesn't count. You lose, Min." Which I I don't know. I feel like, granted, this is like the early '90s or mid late '90s, but I still feel like the dictionary would have had it by then, but maybe not. Luann's like, "Oh, Aunt Peggy, you're so smart. The words I don't know could fill a dictionary." And then Nancy's like, "The Elks are doing a charity boggle to raise bail money for their treasurer. You should go and play." And Peggy's like, "Oh, I just play for fun. It's, nothing competition. Okay, you owe me $13, Min." And then Min's like, "Oh, thank you for teaching me boggle, Peggy Hill. Maybe next time you come over to my place, we play mahjong. Bring your checkbook." Peggy goes up to see Hank. Is like, "Hey, Hank, I think I'm going to go play Boggle with the Elks." And they're like, "What? The Elks? Man, they'll do anything for money." Did they still play that game where they have a cow poop into a square? And he's like, "Oh, but Boggle's not like cow bingo. Boggle's a game of skill. Cow bingo is a game of strategy."
Is that a real thing?
Uh, Maybe. So in Austin, I don't know if they still do it. Like it might have gone away as a result of
COVID.
what's it called, COVID. But in Austin, they had Chicken S Bingo. This is a family friendly show, but they had Chicken S Bingo, which was essentially that where I can't remember was like based on where the chicken pooped or like where it dropped the ball or whatever, but essentially the chicken would like that's how they would fill the bingo card is wherever the chicken made its mess. Like instead of pulling out the balls from like the pop ball, the little barrel that spins, they just if the chicken poops on B28, then they call out B28.
Man, do chickens poop a lot? Like, or do you
Yeah,
have
I
multiple
guess so.
chickens?
I don't know. Like I only know a little bit about it. I've never actually been to one of them, but I've heard them talk about it like on the radio in Austin and stuff. And yeah, I don't know if like COVID got rid of it because of all that, but um, I don't know. It might still be a thing.
Oh, interesting. I might have to check this out.
Yeah, it's been going on for like 20 years, so I'm guessing it's like the same thing. At the Elks Lodge, they're playing Boggle, and Hank all of a sudden shows up. He's like, "All right, I replaced my watch battery, ate a Cinnabon, and bought a pea trap. I can't kill any more time. Let's go." And Peggy's like, "Oh, you're being impatient. It's only round 5." And Hank sits down and just kind of waits, but he's like not happy about it because he's bored. And Peggy is like, oh, yeah, Peggy's she really just showing off. She's like, I hope you don't mind. I only use words that appear in Patsy Cline lyrics, and she's doing really well. And they're like, Bill's like, oh, I guess that's why they call her your better half. And Hank's like, who calls her that? And then there's like a little kid who has a broken leg, and it's like, oh, would you like me to find your name in the Boggle game? And it's like, sure, and he does, or she does find it. So it's like, okay, cool.
Isn't it a really long name?
Yeah, it was. I can't. I should have wrote it down. It was Zachary something or another. But she does find it, and she wins the trophy, and she brings it home, and she's like, "Hey, Hank, you got a clean room on the trophy shelf," and he's all worried because she's putting the trophy up there. It's like, "Be careful, you don't want to knock mine over." And Bobby's like, "Huh, Mom's trophy's bigger than yours, Dad." And uh, Peggy's like, "You know what? I think I'm going to go to the state boggle championship in Dallas." And Hank doesn't like the idea of her going to Dallas, and it's like, "Oh, I won't be going alone. You'll be my coach. You'll be there." And he's still not like he's just really not into it. Like he doesn't even he sees Boggle as a game. He doesn't see it as being all that important. Even when they say like, "Oh, I'm going to state just like you did, Hank," and it's like, "Oh, yeah, it's exactly the same." He's kind of belittling her in a way. Uh, Either way, after she mentions that, oh, it's in Dallas and it's, we'll be back by Sunday, he's like, Sunday? And then he's like, he realizes, oh, that's when the Mower Expo is going to be. So he goes outside and then he's like, hey, guess who's going to the Mower Expo? And if you guess right, you can come with me, which is kind of, he broke the guessing game because he pretty much gave it away with that statement. But they guess Hank and all the guys are going and they're all excited and stuff. And the next day, Hank is honking on the horn, and it's like 4 in the morning, but he's like, "Come on, we got to get up and get to Dallas before the gangs wake up." And Peggy's like, "Oh, it's 4 in the morning. You're being ridiculous." And as she gets ready to leave, and they're leaving Bobby and Luann alone, she's like, "Okay, well, no parties this weekend." It's like, yeah, okay. Nancy comes out, and so does Men, and they're like, on behalf of the Arlen Boggle boosters, we are honoring you with this jacket that has like it's almost like a NASCAR jacket or something. It has patches from all the local businesses and stuff. And then Min says, good luck, Peggy Hill, or goodbye. Where I come from, either you come home a winner or not at all. So, as you could probably tell, like a big part of the conflict is what's the word I'm looking for? Peggy and or it's Peggy and Hank. Like Hank doesn't take the Boggle as seriously as Peggy does. He just thinks it's like a dumb game or whatever. And yeah, I like that Peggy likes to do it, but it's not my thing and it's a waste of my time and blah blah blah. Whereas Peggy, like it's a hobby, but it's a hobby she's passionate about.
I do love the jacket they give her. I like all the sponsors from Arlen. It's really cool. Like it's cool, but then I mean, surprise, but like we never see. There's a little mention of Peggy and Boggle later on in the series, but not as prolific as it is this episode.
Yeah, as like Boggle shows up a lot in the season or in the series, but as like the episodes go and the seasons go, it's almost never mentioned. In fact, I think towards the later seasons, it's not mentioned at all that she liked Boggle.
I mean, okay, I know I'm like talking about a different episode, but anytime we talk about Boggle and Peggy Hill, I always remember like there's some party going on and something's happening, and she's like, "Let's play a board game." Boggle's usually not played with this many people, but we'll figure it out.
Oh yeah, we did that episode. It
Yeah,
was
is it the one
the
where she tries to die in their house?
no, that's the
Oh,
one. Where, I mean, it's a Christmas episode. It's the one where Bill becomes Lenore.
Lenore. Oh, okay. Ah, yes, yes. Ah, I always love that. I love that Peggy's actually really good at Boggle. Like, sometimes she's like, I'm really good at this, and she's not that good at it. But this, she's genuinely like really good at.
Yeah, this is like an actual skill that she has, and is not like just overinflating or anything. After the break, we see Hank is entering Dallas, and he rolls up the windows because he's like, Dallas, it's a crazy place and it's terrible, and it's it's the stereotypical small town guy goes to a big city, assumes he's going to be robbed the second he steps in. Uh, we then see back at the Hill House. We hear the what is it? I'm just drawing a blank on the song. Old Time Rock and Roll by Bob Seger. If I got that wrong, I'm sorry. But we hear that, the stereotypical risky
Risky business.
business
Yeah.
type scene. We see Bobby's kind of slide into the kitchen in his underwear, but then it kind of subverts expectation as he walks to the TV and he's like, Luann, what are you watching? Risky Business? And he's like, I can't watch that. That has adult situations. Like, oh, not this one. It's the edited one from the video store. And I also got a Chuck Mangione fire safety video. Want to watch it with me? He's like, nah, I got to go do my laundry. It's like, well, remember, Chuck Mangione says to always unplug the iron after use. Back in Dallas, we're at the hotel, and they pull in, and the valet shows up, and Hank's a little nervous, but Peggy's like, "Oh, come on, the valet is part of the hotel room." And it's like, I don't know, this guy looks like he's begging to take a joyride in my truck. Peggy walks in, and she is introduced as the Boggle champion of Ireland, and they meet Joan with the Boggle hospitality team, and it's like, oh, welcome. Here's your shirt, your tote bag, and your Boggle lei, and they give her like fillet on, but it's instead of flowers, it's made out of like giant Boggle pieces. Peggy introduces her husband. It's like, oh, this is Hank. It's like, oh, we've got plenty of activities for spouses. You want to make your own wallet? It's like, oh, no, thanks. Harley Davidson already made a wallet for me. And it's like, oh, actually, he's my coach. And so Joan's like, oh, okay, well, here you go. And gives him a pink coach shirt and says coaches must go into, the, I guess, like another room where there's a closed circuit television. Back at the Hill House, Bobby is watching the Chuck Mangione fire safety video, and he reminds them to take off the unplugged iron. Bobby looks over and realizes the iron's unplugged, so he's like, "Good, I got it. I did a great job." And then he's drinking water. Luann comes in and is like, "Bobby, what are you doing? Use a coaster." And as soon as he lifts it, you see the water stain on the table, and they're freaking out like, "Your dad's gonna kill us!" And it's like, and then Bobby's like, "We got to think of something." Luann, you think of something. I, I find it funny because this is going to be like the B plot or the C plot of the show. Or this episode is like them constantly making like minor problems, but blowing them out of proportion. Which I don't know. It makes me wonder like how Hank reacts to things with like what we don't see in the show. If they're really that upset about having left a water stain.
I believe that in if Hank and Peggy were there, Bobby wouldn't have used a coaster anyway. Like I feel like it's probably something that would happen if they were there or they weren't there. It's just the added pressure of like they're in charge, and trying to prove that they can like not make a mistake. The pressure's getting to them.
Yeah, maybe. That's actually a very good point. Like maybe because they're being left alone and stuff, they're worried that when Hank and Peggy come back, they'll think that they're irresponsible or whatever. Back at the hotel, Hank is getting ready to check into the room, and he tells the concierge, Hank Hill, and they're like, "We don't have a Hank Hill. I've got a Peggy Hill." "Oh, that's it. Yeah, Peggy and Hank Hill." "No, we've got a Peggy Hill. I'm her husband." "Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Peggy Hill." And Hank's like really upset. He's hitting the ground, but he's hitting the desk. But as he hits it, like the bell rings, and he's like, I didn't marry her. She married me. Let's listen to me. It's Hank Hill, Mr. and Mrs. Hank Hill." But as he's hitting the table, the bell rings, and so like a different bellhop comes behind him. And by the end, there's like 10 bells behind him. He turns around. He's like, "What are you all looking at?" Then we meet Peggy's arch rival, I guess. Granted, she's only an arch rival for this episode. We never see her again or before. Her name's Sissy Cobb. She's won 7 non-consecutive years. And she's like, I guess, a debutante. She's like super fancy and rich and everything. And Peggy introduces herself, and she acts incredibly snobby to Peggy and calls her Patches, insulting her jacket that she got from the Boggle Boosters Club, and says, "Oh, you're a real rags to riches story." And she is not a likable person at all, and really getting into Peggy's head. Back at the Hill home, they are working hard to varnish out the stain on the table, and it's funny because Luann's freaking out, like, "Hurry up, Bobby! They only have 47 hours until your parents get home." And so Bobby works faster and faster, and he accidentally knocks the can of varnish onto the floor, but nothing falls out. Luann goes and picks up the can, and then like one little drop falls onto the carpet, and they start freaking out even more. At the hotel, Hank is walking around. He has Mr. Peggy Hill on his shirt, and he runs into Sissy Cobb's husband. Is like, "Oh, hi, Peggy Hill." He's like, "Oh, that's my name." He's like, "Oh, you don't have to explain anything. I have an uncle named Leslie." And even the Duke, John Wayne's real name is Marion. And Hank's like, "Take that back," which in real life, John Wayne's real name was Marion. Back at the Hill home, they're vacuuming. They're trying to vacuum the stain out, which was a fool's errand to begin with, because you can't, like, maybe in today's technology you can, but back then you couldn't vacuum a stain out, right? You'd have to use like an upholstery cleaner or something. But they're trying to vacuum the stain out. He puts it on high power, and he winds up short circuiting the socket. So they're just not having a lot of good luck trying to fix these minor problems.
Oh, I was like, not now in my life, now that I'm an adult, but like back then as a kid, I definitely was someone who was like, to fix one problem, I start like two new problems, like just trying to like cover up something. I end up making a bigger mess, and then it's like a bigger mess, and you're just like, if I would have just accepted the fate at the beginning, this would have been fine.
Yeah, probably. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I'm trying to think what I would have done in that situation. I honestly probably wouldn't. I mean, I know it sounds weird. I like honestly wouldn't have cared that I didn't use a coaster and left the water stain if I was 13 years old.
I would probably just wait to see what happened. Like, is it going to evaporate on its own, or is it like? Doesn't it take a while? I don't know. I don't think I've ever left a water stain, but does it take a while for like the cup to be there for a long time?
I think it has to be there, and I think it has to be multiple times. Like, I don't. I'm not an expert by any means, but I don't think one time leaving a water thing on there is going to permanently stain a table. But yeah, and then of course we have the whole story going on with Peggy and Hank, and now we're seeing how, like, I think the problem is so this is my take. I think what's upsetting Hank is not only that it's not something he doesn't care for because he's very indifferent to Boggle in general, but I think he hates the fact that he is kind of second to Peggy in this situation. Like, first of all, the name being under Peggy Hill, and them calling him, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Peggy Hill, and then he being her coach and being called Mr. Peggy Hill and all that stuff. I think that's what's really getting to him, is that he's kind of subsidiary or subservient, whatever term you want to use. He's secondary to Peggy. I think in his traditional mindset, like, he's the head of the household or he's in charge, and then Peggy's like the second in command. And in this instance, it's the other way around.
Yeah, I do feel like, yeah, Hank's very traditional in a lot of senses, and yeah, you're right. This is like you when he was checking in the reservation. It was for, even though it does make sense that it would be under Peggy's name because she is the competitor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just see. This feels like season one stuff, like opposed to like newer season stuff. Or do you? Or well, here I'll pose it. Like in newer season stuffs, when Bobby's into something that Hank's not into, Hank gets too into it and too competitive. You think this is just because it's not Bobby and it's Peggy, that he isn't like overcoaching her or like trying to figure out the strategy? Because Hank is naturally a very competitive person.
I think it's because it's something he's not good at. Like, I think Hank is definitely like good with his hands and stuff. I don't think he would be. We've never really seen it. I don't think like Boggle is something that he can dominate in. Like even if he put his mind to it, he would probably struggle to dominate in it. And I also think he just doesn't care about stuff like that too. So it's probably both. I think just this whole him being here, him being seen as secondary to Peggy and everything, like this whole situation is upsetting him.
Hmm. Yeah, but I mean, also like he's not really there for Boggle.
No, of course not. He's not there for Boggle. He wants to go to the show, and the this gave him the perfect excuse to go. He was like, yeah, he could just say, "Oh, I'm going to help Peggy out" or whatever, and then and then just like bounce whenever she's not paying attention. Speaking of which, in the next episode, or not next episode, the next day, we're at the hotel and we're in the tournament room where the Boggle tournament's taking place, and Hank's like, "Oh, I'm gonna head over to the mower show," and Peggy's like, "Well, no, I need you to stay here and be my coach and everything." And Peggy talks about this vision she has of her winning and being up there in the winner's circle with that big old trophy, and Hank being there right with her and them celebrating. And Hank's like, "Well, I see myself in the mower show, and you're there like a beauty queen of yore, wearing fur coat and." I'll stay. So Hank stays. He goes into the viewing room because they're not allowed on the actual floor. You have to watch from a closed circuit. And we also see on the side that the guys were driving up to Dallas. So he's at some point he's going to meet up with the guys. For the first round, Peggy plays against Sissy Cobb, who it's a subtle thing you might not notice at first, but she has her own chair. Like everybody else in the show, or in the contest rather, has like the standard hotel chair or whatever. She has like an executive chair. So it's like, did she bring her own chair? Did she pay to have her own chair? Is that how fancy she is? But yeah, Peggy plays against Sissy, and that really psychs her out. We see back in the coach's lounge, Sissy's Cobb's husband is like, I guess, taking notes like, yeah, it's a good day for sometimes why. And Hank's not even paying attention. He's like, hey, look, for $10, I can ride the mower that mowed the grassy knoll. And the guy doesn't care either because he's more involved here. At the end, Sissy scores with 73 points. And Peggy, the only word she gets out is dang, which isn't a word. So she scores 0. Back in the hotel room, Peggy she's crying. She thinks she's an idiot. And Hank's trying to make her feel better by saying, like, well, you're smarter than me. And she's like, oh, la-di-da. And it's like, well, you're the smartest person in Arlen. It's like, oh, great. I'm the smartest person in Pigville. And Hank's like, look, I'm trying here. Here, I'll give you the pep talk our coach always gave us. It's like, you're a loser. You're a loser. Why are you crying? Why are you crying? Yeah, why are you crying at me? Are you going to cry, be a baby? And Peggy's like, why are you yelling at me? And Hank's like, I don't know. Coach did this to us and it works. Like, no, it didn't. You guys lost state. And Hank's like, I'm just trying to help. And Peggy's like, well, you made me feel worse. And Hank's like, oh, I need an $8 beer, which definitely shows the dates or how dated this is, because an $8 beer out of a mini bar is actually a good deal in 2023.
Man, I don't think I've stayed. Well, no, I'm trying to think. I don't think I've stayed at a hotel that's had a mini bar.
I have a few times, and I've never ordered anything from it for the obvious reason that, like, unless there's like nothing nearby or whatever, like I can go to the 7-Eleven and get a Coke for much cheaper than what will be in the mini bar. Yeah, I guess it's convenient, but I'm not so lazy that I'm going to just be like, you know what? I don't want to go across the street to a 7-Eleven or 5 blocks away to a 7-Eleven. I'm just going to pay $15 for a Coca-Cola. It's not really that much, but it's definitely way more than what you would pay at like a gas station.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I question Hank. Like, did he really think that pep talk was going to work?
I think he might have, to be honest, just because of who Hank is. Like Hank thinks in terms, like everything is in terms of sports to him. Like he bases everything on, not everything, but most things he relates back to sports. Sports is a huge part of his life and stuff. So he probably thinks like, oh, since that was a good motivational speech from our coach, surely that's going to be a good motivational speech for Peggy.
But you just made me feel worse.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I do think Hank was trying to help, but he just didn't know how to help. So he was just doing the best he could. Cause like he's like, "Oh, you're smarter than me. Well, you're smarter than everyone in Ireland. Well, here's this pep talk my coach will do." And she's I do think he's legitimately trying, but he's just not able to do it.
Mm.
After the break, Peggy's feeling bad. It's the next day, and she's like, "Oh, I ranked 255 out of 256." And Hank's like, "Well, you're better than the Boggle playing chicken."
Yeah.
And so, which I guess is something. At least you're not last place. But the game's getting ready to start, and coaches have to go to the coaches area. So Peggy leaves to go to the room, and Hank walks through the lobby and runs into the guys, Dale, Bill, Boomhauer, and the guys are like, "Oh, Hank, why do you have a purse?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Peggy's." Like, "So, we're gonna go to the mower show." And Hank's like, "Oh no, I gotta support Peggy." And Boomhauer makes the whipping noise, and Hank takes offense to that. Dale's like, "I don't know who you are. I mean, you were just a few days ago. You were like a little boy, excited to see the mowers, and now you're some kind of man. What are you, Hank? Are you a little boy? Or are you a man?" And Hank's like, "No, I'm still a little boy. Come on, let's go head over to the mower show." During the contest, we see that Peggy beats the chicken, and she's slowly beating everybody, winning left and right, and heading up to the finals. But Hank's not there because Hank is at the mower show, and he sees Liberace's mower, and it says no flash photography. And it's kind of funny because I guess it's a mower with a bunch of diamonds on it, and obviously Dale takes a picture, and if the flash reflects and blinds everybody temporarily, Hank sees a kid with the, I forget what the toy is called, but it's like on a stick with a dome at the end and wheels, and you push it and like the little balls pop up and everything. It's like a very old toy, but it reminds him of a Boggle game, and so that's like his guilt coming out. And then they also see the mower of the future, which is like this VR thing, and Hank sees the sand going down from the mulch machine, and now he's seeing it as like the sand in an hourglass for Boggle, and now he's just really having guilt, and he's like, he's realizing that he shouldn't be here, and it's starting to show a little bit because Peggy, as she's winning more and more, she's getting ready for the finals, and she says to the camera, "I'm going to the finals, Hank." But you see the chair that says Mr. Peggy Hill is empty. Finally, at the mower show, we see Hank is hanging out with Boomhauer. He's doing this VR mower thing, which I guess is something you want to do. I don't know. I guess somebody's into it. Whatever. Uh, And Bill is like, "Oh, I haven't had fun like this since our old football road trips, man. That was the last fun time we've ever had. Remember when we went to state and Peggy was there, and even though we were losing, she was cheering her heart out." And Hank kind of has an aha moment and realizes where he should be, and he bounces and leaves. Oh, and I should also mention we see back at the house that Bobby and Luann have hired a bunch of contractors to fix everything.
Mm. I love that Bobby's so invested into the house. I think he says like, "What is it? I spent the last of my money
Mm-hmm.
on the deodorizing guy, and we have people sanding the coffee table, and there's things." And I know this part is funny to me, but there's a guy walking with a bucket of paint, and Bobby's like, "Is that eggshell white? Because it has to be Swiss cream."
I mean, I appreciate the length that they're going to try to make this better, but I honestly think had they just left the little droplet on the thick carpet, they would have been fine.
True, but I do appreciate that Bobby because I remember there's like throw into another episode, but isn't there another episode where Hank's like, "Peggy, you can pick any shade of white that you want."
Yes, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, so I appreciate that Bobby also understands that this isn't just any white; it's Swiss cream white, which sounds too fancy
Yep,
for Hank. Actually,
it does. Maybe that was Peggy's choice.
hmm.
So we are at the finals. Hank is not there. This in the finals. Apparently, your coach is actually allowed to be there in the room with you, kind of sitting behind you. So Sissy Cobb is who Peggy's going up against, and her husband's around, but Hank is not. And so Peggy is like, "Oh, come on, Hank, where are you? Where are you?" But then they're not waiting. The tournament's not going to wait. They're just going to go. So guy comes out. It's like, no foreign words or objects. Best out of three, go. And Sissy Cobb is doing well, and Peggy is like, her headspace is just not there because where's Hank? Hank's abandoned me. She's trying to she is starting to write and stuff, and she breaks her pencil, but because she doesn't have a coach to give her a new pencil, she just chews the pencil to sharpen it again. They're like, "Oh, pencil's down," and then they read off their words, and it's funny because it's funny, but in a sad way, because Peggy's like reflecting on her emotions now, because she's like, her words are all sad, abandoned, bad, man, stuff like that. Uh, we see outside that Hank is just barreling through, and he parks his car right outside the hotel and tosses the key to the valet. So it shows how important this is to him, to where now he just doesn't even care who drives this truck. Peggy is inside and she breaks her pencil again, and that's her last pencil, and she's just like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm going to do." But Hank shows up in time and gives her another pencil, and it's like, "Hey, where have you been?" And Hank's like, "Doesn't matter where I've been. I figured out where I should be." This gives Peggy brand new confidence to play the game. Time's up. Sissy Cobb goes and gives off her word. It's all like fancy words like caviar and harpsichord and stuff like that. Instead, Peggy uses a bunch of small words to narrow the gap. There's only one word left on her list, and she needs 10 points to win. And so Sissy Cobb goes and looks, and she's like, "Oh, it's ain't. Ain't isn't a word. I win." And Peggy's like, "No, it's acquaintanceship. Like, it was not my pleasure to make your acquaintanceship. I win." And then Peggy wins, and they go to the winner's circle, and we see Sissy Cobb, and Sissy Cobb's husband's given her the same speech Hank gave. Peggy's like, "Loser, loser, why are you crying?" uh, Hank is like, "Peggy, Coach said he would do something to us if we ever won state." And he goes and kisses Peggy, and the episode ends, but we get kind of a post-credit scene where these contractors are still at the house, like wrapping up, but then Peggy and Hank show up, and they think that a party is happening, and so they like yell at them to leave and everything, and say they're going to punish Bobby in the win. So it's kind of funny.
Oh man. Well, this is definitely one of my favorite episodes. At the end, though, I love because Peggy's sharpening the pencil with her teeth, and then Hank comes back and like she's broken the pencil. I love when she smiles at Hank. You can see all like her blacked out teeth because of her sharpening the pencil with her teeth.
Yep.
I love that. Anytime I think of this episode, I always think of the words that Sissy Cobb writes at the end. What is it like? It's harpsichord, chinchilla, and gosh, what was the other one?
I know caviar was on there. It was
Caviar.
a lot of big words, but like
No,
fancy words.
No, because she only writes 3 words because she thinks she's got it. Because
Yeah, that's true.
the commentator's like, she wrote harpsichord, but not harp or chord. So I always think of that. I don't know. I love the comeback of this episode. This is a great Hank coming around and realizing what's important kind of episode.
I mean, it's one of those things where you kind of wish he was there from the get go, but it is good that he did come around and realize where he needed to be. Like that's I think the ultimate memo here, or the message or whatever, is that he realizes where he's supposed to be. And I think what it was, I mean, at first we start to see that the guilt is eating at him because like everywhere he looks he sees Boggle, so he knows already where he's supposed to be, that he needs to be with Peggy and not here at the mower show. But then, like when when Bill makes that comment about, "Oh, you remember Peggy was cheering her heart out even when we were losing and stuff." Hank's like, that's when Hank realized, like, "Oh, yeah, I'm the bad guy here. Like, Peggy was cheering her heart out when it was my turn to be in its state, and I'm here at a mower show when she's at state. I know where I need to be."
Yep, right by her side. And it is kind of sad that he didn't know that she made it to the championship. But how quickly everything must have happened.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they ever say exactly where everything is, but let's just pretend that like the two items or the two events were on the other sides of town. So maybe a lot of time passed between him going to the mower show, hanging out at the mower show, and coming back.
Mm. Yeah, and
That's my
it's
head
just
canon.
it's just such a great like seeing him throw the keys to the valet, like not even thinking about anything. It's just I love it. I love that he finally realizes like I know where I should be.
He also has his coach shirt on, which means I don't know that that was the most important thing for him to do at that point, but he even changed his shirts to kind of boost Peggy, if you will,
Hmm.
because he was not wearing his. Even when he pulls in, he's not wearing his coach shirt. I don't believe. So he changes in the hotel.
Do you think he always had it with him though? Like, was it in that? Because he had like a bag with him.
Maybe it probably was in that bag. But like even in the day before, when he's at the coaches circle, like he's not even paying attention to the game. He's just watching, or he's reading through like the mower show brochure. So yeah, he comes around, and then poor Bobby and Luann, they were just trying to do the right thing, but then they're in trouble for having a party.
Yeah.
Granted, I don't know why they needed that many contractors to fix what they screwed up. Like unless they screwed up other things like behind the scenes that we never got to see. Like one guy could have fixed the outlet and fixed the table and like cleaned the carpet in like 2 3 hours. Like one handyman could have done that.
Well, I mean, I feel like they just got every specialist they could.
I guess in that case it would make sense, but I don't know. I still feel bad because they were just trying to do the right thing, but it screwed up. So whatever. I like this episode, early episode. We only have one episode left to Sirloin with Love. Do you have anything else on this one?
No, I know this is definitely this is like I said earlier. This is really one of my favorite episodes. I feel like it was on my. I don't know if this was because we come. This was on. This has always been one on my list. I always like to rewatch it. Um, it hasn't encouraged me enough to want to play Boggle. I'm very like not good of a speller, so Boggle's not my kind of jam. But I don't know. Maybe next time we visit each other, we play some Boggle.
I'd be for that. I can't even tell you the last time I played Boggle, but I'm down for trying that. Well, next time, like I said, we're going to be wrapping up King of the Hill. Though apparently, when we created this list, this was the last episode of King of the Hill. But with the news, it looks like it's not going to be anymore. But we will see you all next week when we do To Sirloin with Love. Until then, I'm Jason.
And I'm Jimmy.
Bye.
Bye.